Great, thank you very much. I feel like we have a really great panel of experts and practitioners who have worked with Mozilla on projects that really illuminate the complex relationship we have with our data and the products and services that use it. So we're going to hear from each of the panelists for about 5 minutes each. There's some presentations and some talks, and then I have some questions I want to put to them. But I think it'd be really great if we have some audience questions as well. So there is a capacity to do that through Slido, and I'll be checking on questions as they come in, and we can weave those in with the questions that I've put together. But if there's more interesting questions from the audience than my questions, then those can dominate. And we're going to start with Alex Fefegha. He is a product designer and research technologist from London. He set up a research lab called Comuzi. Their speciality is the invention of radical products, different ways of thinking, services, and experiences. It was commissioned by the Mozilla Foundation and curator Irini Papadimitriou of Future Everything to produce a speculative provocation responding to the theme of better machine decision-making for MozFest 2019 Arts and Cultures Experience. This was the Invisible Mask, which he will introduce further. Thank you very much, Alex.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Yeah, I'm just gonna share my screen as we begin this presentation. And let me just, cool. Cool. So, good evening, everyone. I'm quickly gonna share this. This is a shortened version of a talk that I gave a couple months back at the Photographers Gallery about looking at facial recognition technology and also looking at, creating tools that essentially kind of protect activists from the term I'm using, technological policing. So I'm just going to quickly go into that. I'm Alex from South London. I make radical and playful things with technology. I'm from Comuzi, which is a design and creative tech studio. And I'm also an academic teaching computational features and artificial intelligence at University of Arts London, Creative Computing Institute. So, we constantly analyze the world around us. We see, label, make predictions, and recognize patterns. That's where bias can creep in. And I've always defined bias in regards to algorithms or artificial intelligence, machine learning, in this way of bias occurs in AI systems when they reflect human biases, held by the people involved in coding, collecting, selecting, or using data to train the algorithms that power that AI system. And so when I look at it, I think of the ways how computers learn, and they learn through these three ways of supervised learning, unsupervised learning, and reinforcement learning. And I always have this phrase that computers are stupid. They just make our human mistakes faster. And this is an example of what I mean. So this is my student. This is an image that I took from one of my class where I was teaching a student how to sort of create a image recognition sort of system using a popular image recognition library. And my student is of South Asian origin, and she put her hands in this way. I'm not sure if anybody can see me, but she put her hands in particular gun fingers. And it was really interesting that it was able to detect that it was as you can see here, it's probably not as clear, but it was able to identify as a revolver 6-gun 6-shooter. That was what it was able to identify. And for me, I was very interested in terms of why did it do that? And essentially, we tend to always blame computers and say it's a black box and all of these particular things. But when we look at image recognition, we as humans, we see the image of the cat, but a computer sees this. That's what a computer sees. And then the computer is always trying to make a particular prediction. In this case here, for this example, the computer is making this prediction that 82% of it could be a cat, 15% of it could be a dog, 2% could be a hat, and 1% could be a mug. However, that is what a computer does. That is what machine learning does. It analyzes information that has been given to be analyzed, and then it makes a prediction. It's been trained on something prior. And so when we talk about bias in AI systems, it was about their particular sort of data set. Sorry, I'm just presenting this. And so what I wanted to talk about was adversarial machine learning. And I kind of look at this in the way of some form of hacking focus on full and machine learning models. And most of the examples I'm going to talk about are focused on image classification. So, as mentioned by Beth, we were commissioned by the Mozilla Foundation to create what we call the invisible mask, or we was commissioned to explore the topic of better machine learning. And in this case, we decided to explore the invisible mask, which is what we call a speculative provocation, exploring the attack on human agency and autonomy by facial recognition technologies. And for us at Comuzi, activism is important. As we can see in the world right now, where a lot of us are engaged in some form of activism regarding the Black Lives Matter protest. This is a picture I took in 2016. One of the things that's happening now is, police forces are increasingly upgrading their systems and are using new forms of technology in order to sort of engage in this level of law enforcement. And for particular communities, especially Black people, what that does cause is this attack on autonomy and attack on agency. And we wanted to play around with those particular sort of like tension points. And it was inspired by this academic paper called Invisible Masks, Practical Attacks on Facial Recognition with Infrared. And so this was a study by a bunch of scholars in China, sort of exploring facial recognition technologies and ways and how you could use infrared light to invade them. And it was inspired by a lot of projects which you initially have with CV Dazzle by an artist, Ada Harvey. And there's like now groups called Dazzle clubs where they walk around places in London and they identify where the cameras are and they try to find ways on how to invade them. And that's like become a growing movement in recent times. You've got Hyperphase, which was also by Adam Harvey and Hyphen Labs. And this was a prototype of a scarf that you could wear and it had multiple faces. So the camera is not able to detect who and where exactly what to explore. Then you had this, which was really nice, really interesting, really lovely sort of form of facial jewelry, but it was called incognito. And it was this form of being able to sort of invade, this facial recognition technologies. And then you also had this really interesting paper as well, which is called Full and Automated Surveillance Camera Adversarial Patches to Attack Person Detection. And so as you see in this image here, you've got this individual who's wearing a normal piece of clothes, and it was basically trying to fool what you call the YOLO facial recognition model, which is a facial recognition model, which is quite popular. And this individual here was wearing a particular patch. And what happens is, based on how, like, if I go back, based on how the computer reads an image, it doesn't read an image by saying, I look at this and it's a cat. It doesn't look at it as how we look at it. It doesn't see that those are ears. It sees that in like particular, like I just showed in that diagram, particular numbers and things like that. Like if I had a longer time, I'll go into much more dedication process of that, but I don't. But the neural networks are detecting particular things. And what's happened here is that based on how this multitude of colors in a way has been able to sort of fool the model from being able to detect this individual over here. There's a really good YouTube video, which is really funny. Definitely check it out. And this is a paper for anybody who wants to check it out, who actually reads papers. But if you do, it's a great paper to check out. And this is also another interesting paper, which I just wanted to introduce as well to the audience. And it kind of talks about mask and camouflage and artistic imaginaries of facial recognition algorithms. And in a way, it's talking about like the bunch of work by artists who have sort of challenged facial recognition, however, creating this state of anxiety. And that's one of the kind of scary things when you're trying to create this speculative provocation, because you want to educate people, you want to spark conversation, but you don't want to create this environment of anxiety. And that's kind of what happens when you create this type of projects. Nonetheless, the invisible mask is made of, it's like infrared light, and it emits on particular parts of the human face. And the whole concept behind it is that facial recognition technologies are beginning to become more sophisticated with infrared light. And the whole concept is basically fighting infrared with infrared. So the whole theory behind it is that the facial recognition camera is not able to detect you once the light emits on your face. And even with the study, one of the things that was being experimented was how you could create a new identity for yourself based on how you were able to program the mask in terms of when the light emits on your face, the facial recognition camera would detect another face. And so the whole sort of our vision for this thing was like, we create something which we could upload the code in GitHub and somebody could download it and they could somehow patch this together. We just use Arduino tools. We just got infrared lights off eBay. We just patched it together. And one of the things we kind of made sure when we were presented this to people is that we kind of made sure we made sure it was unpolished on purpose. And that was because we didn't want it. We were thinking maybe make this polished, make this really cool. But because of that concept of the anxiety and all of these things, we kind of left it in this very unpolished way. And then what we kind of did, I do have this video which I probably won't play. We kind of created like this game environment. I don't know if it was sound out, I would just the sound. And we kind of created this game environment and got people to take part in the process of playing with this type of stuff. So that was kind of like what we did for this particular project. And yeah, so that's what I just wanted to introduce as my sort of side coming in to talk and trying to make sure I did this in 5 minutes. So if I was too fast, but
yeah, we're being a little strict, but that, yeah, I think that's a good summary. It's a very interesting project. Thank you very much, Alex.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And I'd like to introduce Ashley Boyd. She is a vice president at Mozilla, where she leads on work to fuel the open internet movement and to mobilize millions to stand up for a free open web. Prior to joining Mozilla, Ashley was vice president and chief field officer for Mums Rising, a national grassroots organization in the US. Ashley has over 2 decades of experience in public interest advocacy with a specialization in effective uses of technology and public engagement. Please welcome Ashley.
Thanks so much for having me. And I feel so lucky to go after Alex because so much already that has inspired me. And I want to uplift from what you talked about. I think this idea of just presenting a radical alternative is such a powerful way to think about our moment in time right now. So I want to talk a little bit about how a project like Alex's fits into the Mozilla Foundation's work and Mozilla's work more generally, and then have a couple of thoughts just sort of about this moment and how we can think about both privacy and also how that tees up and really empowers our conversation around algorithms too. To build on what Alex was talking about, sort of reimagining, like the radical products for me is really about sort of reimagining the future as we live in the future as it is. And I was really struck and really appreciate this notion of wanting to introduce and empower people without introducing anxiety. And I think that's really so much of what we're trying to do at Mozilla is really live in this balance of the world as it is and the world as we want it to be. And it really kind of goes back to our very structure as an entity. So I always do like to share that Mozilla is a complex beast and provide a little bit of a framework for understanding. Mozilla as an entity was founded in 1998, and we have 2 components. We have the Mozilla Corporation and the Mozilla Foundation. I work for the Mozilla Foundation, as does my colleague Jen, who you'll be hearing from shortly. And what's so nice about the way that these entities work together is that the corporation is building products. You're likely familiar with the Firefox browser, which is one of our key products, also trying to bring new products. So as a builder, the corporation is really understanding what does it take to create a private and secure product? What are the realities of building and marketing and customer service and care? And so that really provides a grounding to our movement and aspirational work led by the foundation. And the foundation's mission is to fuel a movement for internet health. Internet health for us is the topics that you hear about and think about, like centralization and openness and web literacy. So what does it mean to work with a community of people, including folks like Alex and many, many others, in building the future that we want and reimagining our future? As a foundation, we've really begun to deepen our investment around AI and a piece of work we're calling trustworthy AI. And for us, that builds on the foundation of AI being both having agency and accountability built in. So we know that we're a ways from that, but that's really the aspiration that we think is possible. That's what the reimagining and the work that we're supporting and doing is really geared towards. And we're looking specifically from the foundation standpoint at the consumer angle. It's an angle and it's a population that we're familiar with, again, from our building history. But we also have heard repeatedly that it's been difficult to know how to talk to consumers about AI, how to do that in a responsible way that both creates ambition and excitement about what's possible, but also, really locates and is honest about some concerns. So we're looking at it from a balanced approach and how AI is showing up in broad consumer technologies. When we looked at whether or not and how we should engage on this issue, this topic about there being a gap in talking to consumers directly about AI really popped up, and it's a gap that we thought we could fill in working with our community. So that's a little bit of background about why we're here. Just want to share a couple top line thoughts from me in terms of things that I've learned about the work in Privacy Not Included, how that connects to our work on trustworthy AI, because it really is a continuum, and work about social change, because I've been in the social change game for a while. So I have some top level thoughts that I just put out there. One is that transparency, while a very noble goal, is the beginning, not the end. And actually, I get a little worried when transparency is referenced too much in a conversation without an extension of what's to come. Because it really is a first step. Transparency is important because it provides a level playing field about what's happening and creates the conditions for accountability. Because transparency should lead to accountability, we need actually a robust collection of people and organizations who can be part of that accountability crew. So that means civil societies, companies, governments, builders, investors. These all work together, ideally, in terms of being accountable towards trustworthy ends. One thing that I've really learned in the last couple of years is our viewpoints are more similar than they are different. So the things that we need to break down, understand, provide, talk about with policymakers and consumers is more alike than different. And that's true for investors and even builders as well. So we're starting, we have different outputs in terms of what we're trying to do, but a bunch of the level setting that we need to do is similar between us, which is actually an advantage, and I think one that we can lean into. We can't build our way out of things, but nor can we or should we ignore the promise and opportunity of building things. As someone who's worked a lot on policy making in my career, I actually find it exciting to think about how we can reimagine what's possible through technology and tools. So it's neither the silver bullet, as we would say, or something we should ignore. It's a very, very powerful tool. And then finally, and I think Jen will talk about this a bunch in Privacy Not Included, but our goal for actually the Privacy Not Included publication and a lot of our consumer education work is not to shame companies, and in particular around corporate responsibility, but to change norms. However, I would say that there is a little bit of discomfort that goes with the territory of trying to change norms, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that there has to be, again, it doesn't have to come from a shame place, but accountability does come with discomfort, and I think that it's important for us to use that responsibly, but use that as a tool. And with that, I'll hand it over.
Great, thank you very much, Ashley. That's wonderful, and leads quite naturally there onto Jen's work. So Jen Coltrider is content strategy lead at Mozilla. She began her career as a journalist at CNN and moved from there into digital media. She is recognized as a pioneer in the use of digital media strategies, messaging, and communications. She designs and creates digital campaigns that reach millions online and off. Her video productions have won multiple awards. She also has a passion for leaving the world a better place than she found it. Go ahead, Jen.
Hello, thank you. I was very excited that I got asked to speak at an AI conference because, I don't know, not many people actually know this, but I did my master's degree work in artificial intelligence and very quickly learned that I'm much better at telling stories than writing code, and kind of left that behind a very long time ago. So this is like the first time I've ever got to use that master's degree work that I did. So I'm here to talk about privacynotIncluded.org, which is our buyer's guide for consumer products, where we review the privacy and security of, I think we have 78 devices and 14 video call apps on our guide right now that we've reviewed the privacy and security of. And it's been an interesting journey in creating Privacy Not Included. So 2017 rolls around, and we at Mozilla are like, we really need to kind of crack this nut of how we talk to people about privacy, because I think, you know, a lot of people are trying it, but we aren't getting through. We aren't breaking through. And we put our heads together and had the brilliant idea to, hey, let's make a buyer's guide. Didn't really have a clue of what that might look like. So I put my head down with some other really smart people and said, well, let's review products. That's not necessarily what Mozilla does, but we figured if we worked hard, we could figure it out. And so in 2017, we reviewed the privacy and security of 45 products with things like, do they use encryption? How do they share your data? Does it require a password? And we had no idea kind of what was going to happen when we launched it. And we put it out, and we discovered that the media had a very big appetite for this because nobody else was doing it. The Consumer Reports and the Wirecutter's and the CNETs and the publications like that, there are a lot of publications that reviewed products for, hey, what are their features and how well do they work and what's their reliability? But nobody was looking into, hey, how private and secure is this connected, you know, smart speaker, or this Fitbit that you're going to wear, this toy you're going to give your child, or the scales that you're going to weigh yourself on. Or we even reviewed connected sex toys at one point, because that seems important to know if your sex toy is secure and private. And so when we saw the media's appetite for this back in 2017, it encouraged us. It's like, oh, okay, like this is good. We're filling a gap that nobody else is filling. Let's keep it up. But we also recognized that, you know, first year, you don't get everything right. So second year rolled around, we knew we needed to make it a little more accessible to the average consumer. And we really dug into that. And out of that came what we call our minimum security standards. And those are 5 criteria, things like encryption and strong passwords, and does it manage security vulnerabilities, have a privacy policy. And those were kind of the, hey, we think that the products that are on the market should meet these bare minimum security standards. Like if they don't meet them, we feel like they shouldn't be on the market. And we introduced those in our second year. We also introduced what we call lovingly our creepometer, which is a way that we wanted to give consumers a voice. That's what we do at Mozilla, is we try and find ways to give consumers a voice to kind of put pressure on companies. Ashley mentioned about, you know, we're not here to shame companies. Sometimes maybe it needs to happen. But that like level of discomfort that, hey, people are unhappy with your product, they find it creepy. We wanted to give people a way to show that. So we created our creepometer. It's a fun little slide on every product where you can tell people how creepy you think a product is and how likely you are to buy it. And we put that out the next year, and it was wildly popular. The media loved it. People loved it. We had tens of thousands of creepometer ratings on our products in our first year using that. And it was really interesting because, you know, we were warned, well, there's, you know, what's to stop companies from going in there and you know, abusing the creepometer or anything like that. And we put some measures in place to try and stop that. But we just kept an eye on it, just out of curiosity to see what would happen. And it was really interesting that, you know, the products that were the least creepy in the guide, the Nintendo Switches, were the people found them least creepy. And the products that were really creepy in the guide, the like, you know, the Alexas and the Facebook portals, people find those really creepy. And it shows. If you go to our landing page and you scroll, the products are listed in order of how people rate them on the creepometer. And it's really fascinating to watch that. And so so the next thing we learned after we rolled all that out was that, you know, our first year we had those minimum security standards. A little over half of the companies met them. I think maybe it was like 65%. And that wasn't great. And so we pushed. Last year when we rolled out the guide, we discovered that almost all of the companies, something close to 90% of the companies, products that we reviewed met our minimum security standards. But what we also learned was that companies were getting really a lot worse at privacy. They were getting better at security. You know, they were using encryption. They were requiring strong passwords, and that's great. But they were also getting much better at taking people's data, collecting their data and using it. And we saw that. And so what we're hoping to do with the guide this year, as we launch our version 4.0, is really dig into that privacy space and figure out, hey, you know, what's kind of how do we show people, you know, this product might be secure, but it's not really private. And how do we get that out there and then get people to care? That's the challenge that we face. Is people say they care about privacy, but they aren't sure what to do about it. And hey, those Bose headphones are really cool. I want them. So it's been an interesting journey with privacy not included, because I really enjoy the consumer facing work and actually hearing from the people, and interacting with the companies too. You know, we have companies reach out to us now asking to be in the guide, asking to, you know, if they have something that we don't like, we hear from them a lot too. So I'm excited that we're really putting pressure and bringing the world closer together between, you know, what's the privacy of your product and what can companies do about it. So, thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Jen. It's very interesting. Now I have my own questions that I pre-prepared, but I've seen a few coming in as we've all been talking. So I think I'll throw it open to questions from the audience, and then if we need my questions, we can go back to them. So a few very interesting ones to begin with. We've got Jade saying, as a young person, how can I effectively engage my peers in paying attention to their online privacy? Do you have any points that seem to especially resonate? Great question there, because it's about bringing in people into the conversation and helping them to understand. So open to anyone. Does anyone want to jump in straight away on that one?
Around this time last year, I did a piece of work with a design studio called Projects by If, and we sort of were exploring how could young people understand automated decisions. That was kind of like the sort of brief, and in our research, we saw that people were able to understand like the underlying information, but I think in our head it was like, how do we not overburden people with information, but how do you find tangible middle grounds where people could, you know, if they can understand how their Alexa works, for example, then maybe and they can explain that, how do you find information or tangibles or content or tools or things that you could say to somebody in a way that they would be able to understand. And I think that's been always the challenge. You know, we always ask that people should know what their data or what their information is being used for, but how many people really want to be burdened with that information? And so like explaining or communicating data and privacy has been like areas of interest in our work in Comuzi. And one of the things we've been trying to do is finding this balance. People know what data is, people know what privacy is, but finding it in a way where it isn't, like I said, overwhelming. That's kind of like what we're trying to sort of address right now in terms of that. But I'd be interested in hearing the thoughts of others in this case.
Great. Ashley, Jen, do you want to come in on the question about how you engage younger people in questions of privacy and issues for them?
Yeah, the way I think about it is, I always think people never remember what you say; they remember how you made them feel, and that's what I like about the creepometer and even just the concept of creepiness. It seems that like everybody knows that feeling in their gut when you've been creeped out, when you're feeling creepy, like it sticks with you. And so for me, I think for young people, but I think for people of all ages, like really driving home, like when you're feeling creepy, like pay attention to that. That's real. And think about why you're feeling that and how this product's making you feel. And then think about, okay, I don't know what to do about it. What should I do about it? And then get involved. You know, it's the companies aren't going to make it easy for us to kind of opt out of things. And so unfortunately right now there's way too much responsibility on us as consumers to kind of take charge of that. But remembering that creepy feeling and helping people understand that creepy feeling, I think is important.
Yeah, I just want to add Totally agree with all of those pieces. And I would say that I think it's really interesting. One of the things we tracked in Privacy Not Included is this idea of going from personal or individual privacy and security to collective privacy. And I think overall, one of the things that's, in this difficult, painful time that actually is promising is talking more about systemic issues at a systemic level. And I would say that I think we can really drive a conversation about privacy at a more collective, systemic level, which is really how it's happening, right? So I may trade away a piece of individual information, but if that goes into a machine learning data set, then I have a different, feeling about it or stake about it, because it may have implications and does have implications for my community, and I might act on that basis. So I think it's a really interesting time to start changing our conversation about privacy from an individual one to a systemic one. And I think that that's something that actually young people are very ready and already having a conversation at that level. So we need to be having that conversation at that level with them.
Great, thank you, Ashley. Actually, there's a question here that I think is probably directed in response to Ashley's talk.
Yeah.
From Kaya or Kaja, sorry if I mispronounced your name. How would you define trustworthy AI? How exactly are you building in agency and accountability? So to Ashley initially, and then if anyone else wants to join in on that one.
Sure. And this is a good opportunity for me to plug that we just published and will be going increasingly putting out a call for comments about a white paper that we developed about our approach to trustworthy AI. So a bunch of that thinking is really laid out there, and you can search for that online and read that. I think one thing that's very interesting, and where we're I think, in a similar spot to many organizations and people in this field, is, okay, we've got a lot of ethical principles. Now what? So, as one of my colleagues says, pencils down on the creating ethical guidelines. We've got enough of those. There's a bunch of similarities. We're excited about the Berkman-Klein work in terms of identifying patterns across those guidelines. Now, what do those look like in practice? So it's time to go from the conceptual to the concrete. We want to be part of that effort. We know that there are a bunch of people working on that. So I would be honest and say that, this is a place where defining what those look like in different contexts, what does that look like for consumers? I really want to uplift what Alex said about, we don't want to overwhelm people. I have a concern that we'll go from complete black box to overwhelming amount of information, and that is just as inactionable. So what is that middle ground that does actually drive accountability and agency, and is suited for the various professional fields and the communities that are using them? So no easy answers, but plenty of work being done to address that and get more specific.
The other two, would you like to join in on the question of accountability and trustworthiness in AI? Oh, okay. We can move on. Well, I mean, it's an extended question that draws on the same sort of points from Jade. Who do we hold accountable? If we're talking about agency and AI, as Ashley was bringing up, is there a suggestion that we're locating agency too much in the AI itself? Where do we locate that responsibility? I think with Jen's project, it's about digging around into the terms and conditions and finding the legal aspects of that. But is there another way we can find who's responsible? Who should we be locating responsibility with? So anyone who wants to come in on that?
It's an interesting one for me, because I think the invisible mask was situated in this future where people felt they couldn't hold no one accountable, so they just protected themselves. That was the whole concept of the invisible mask. Was like, we always talk about the accountability conversation a lot of the times, and what happens a lot of the times is a lot of people try to remove accountability from themselves. That's one thing when we explore this sort of, world of AI ethics, if we call it that case. There's always this, I'm not responsible, they're responsible, always pointing fingers, all of this type of stuff. After a while, that causes accountability fatigue. And so we always like this thing of like, all right, cool, you can't trust nobody, protect yourself, which is a different type of conversation, which honestly for me is more raw and honest. But so I might have a different approach. Like, I don't know who to hold accountable, so my best advice to you is to protect yourself, hold yourself accountable in terms of your actions and how you navigate these things. But once again, that also adds this level of burden and anxiety. So it goes into this constant like this sort of swing, and you're going back and forth in terms of that conversation of who should be heard accountable. That's my thoughts on that question there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and Jen's project obviously involved a lot of work for your team and yourself, finding all these aspects of each product, and then obviously the input from the users of your website. But do you feel then, therefore, the burden of responsibility is taken away from the corporations themselves to be this transparent because you've kind of stepped in and done this very useful work? Or is the burden being unfairly placed on consumers to do this kind of work? Where do you feel like the weight of burden should lie?
Well, I personally feel like the weight of burden should lie 100% on the companies. People, like, we should do what's right. But we also know that is not happening, and it's not likely to happen anytime soon. And, I think a lot about seatbelts and how seatbelts came about. I know. Let me make a left turn here for a second. But I think about the seatbelts because I think about, in the 60s and 70s, people were dying all over the place in car crashes because you weren't required to wear a seatbelt. And the way they solved that problem wasn't by saying, hey, drivers of cars, you should really install these seatbelts, go out and buy them and install them yourself and you'll save lives, because that would have been pretty unrealistic. What they did instead was they said, hey, car manufacturers, you install these seatbelts. Government said, hey, we'll make rules for the car manufacturers to be required to install seatbelts, and we'll require the people that use cars to wear them. And so there was a three-prong attack between policymakers and companies and users that finally got it done, that then allowed people to have seatbelts in their cars, and people stopped dying at the same rate that they were. And so I think, right now, almost all the burden is on consumers, and it's ridiculous because imagine having to install a seatbelt for every app that you download, and then 2 weeks later they change the specs on that seatbelt, and you got to update it again. And that's kind of the world we live in. How many apps do we use? How do you keep up with the privacy and security of all those and the terms of service? It's impossible for consumers to do. So I would like to see, us putting more burden on the companies and to have the policymakers really step up and do that. And consumers are going to have to be involved in that fight. But we're asking a lot of them in this world today where so much is already being asked of them.
Yeah, I would just add on to that, which is, privacy not included, as I said, is a tool of transparency to tee up accountability and action. And so, the very notion that we have a team reading what is, meant to help guide consumers, and they have to dig through for hours and hours in the terms and conditions and look through other consumer material to come up with some information, but not always all the information that people want, shows the burden that is currently on people. So we're trying to really expose that as, unsuitable conditions to drive consumer behavior. Once the information in a product category is clear, then, as I said, it's not so much a shame approach, but it is putting products in a context and comparing them. So it is leveraging that piece of saying, okay, well, if you want this type of product, here are the options that you have, and many of products that are in that category group, and you can choose the one that best suits what you're concerned and thinking about around privacy and security. And that is meant to drive agency by the consumers. So of course, this all works together in a virtuous cycle, hopefully. But as Jen said, the overall accountability really is, as we believe, on the company side, to not only produce products that are safe and secure, and provide adequate information about them, but be clear about what they're doing and what system you're actually participating in, because that's not even clear in the materials necessarily that we're able to analyze.
Mm-hmm. Excellent points. I want to finish. We have about 4 minutes left for this question, but I think it's a good one to finish on because Chad asks, will you provide a call to action about exercising privacy rights? And if you do, how do you localize that by country? I think ending on a call to action statement is a good idea. So if we want to go round, is there something in particular you want to sort of state about people's involvement and responsibility and corporations' involvement and responsibility in privacy and data? Who wants to go first? Let's go alphabetical again. Alex, jump you in there.
That's a good question. Would you provide a call of action to about exercising privacy rights? If you do, how do you localize that by country? And I think it is by organizations like Mozilla supporting these type of work, because that's the thing, right? You kind of need to do this type of stuff. You kind of need some form of infrastructure, some sort of support system, some sort of, things that allow a lot of these things to come together. Because, if I was trying to do something like this myself, every country is different and every country has its own laws. So one of the things is trying to find methods and systems and things that work that can be transferable, like in a local setting, but also in a global setting as well. And you kind of need those particular partners who can support and bring those things essentially to life. And taking in the cultural. One of the issues that I have issue with the word ethics a lot of the times is like the cultural aspect of each country or environment or region. And there's a cultural thing, because privacy, it's actually kind of more of a Western conversation versus maybe coming from where I come from. My heritage is Nigerian, where most people coming from particular parts of Nigeria or living in the village, for example, may have a completely different conversation to the word of privacy. Like it's not the same. You live in a village, kind of everybody knows what's going on. Everybody knows what's going on in this person's house. Doors are open community. It takes a village to raise a child. Where in the Western world, we're quite different. We close our door. We're trying to hide. Lockdown has been different. People are seeing each other and speaking to their neighbors again. But it's a different sort of case, and I think like you have to sort of it's a group effort. It's a collective effort, as what was said. But so I think that's what I think about that call to action, that there isn't one call to action that fits all. There's one that has to take into consideration everything that comes with that particular locality.
Briefly, Ashley, Jen, do you want to come in on that?
I'll jump in and just say, really do appreciate the how culturally specific and country and region specific it is. Mozilla does have an action alert and an action network that you can sign up for by going to foundation.mozilla.org, and we do provide some action opportunities. We're very careful about making sure that we really provide meaningful opportunities and really describe what you can do. So we share action opportunities plus resources like privacy not included. If you're in Europe or in California where I live, you can exercise your rights under GDPR or similar laws. One of the key reasons to do that is to really, what I really want to do is I want to eliminate any question that people care about this stuff, right? So we've got to get out of the sort of death spiral of, well, people don't care, so we won't build things according to privacy and security, because ultimately people don't care. I think people do care, and so exercising the rights that you currently have to demonstrate care is really, really important. And then finally, for all people, including those who live within GDPR regions, is to actually reach out to the companies if you're not sure. One of the reasons why corporate accountability campaigns are very effective and are used in many different contexts is because companies are very much looking out for what their customers are saying. They're not always responsive in the moment, but they do track these things, and there's ways to contact companies. So, if you're not sure about what a product does, if you are not buying a product because of what you understand are features that you don't like about their product, tell them. And that is a very effective way to start to drive change.
Yes, okay, I'm afraid due to time, we're gonna wrap up there. But I think we've had a very interesting conversation with lots of different aspects to each other's work that overlap with each other. It's been very interesting to hear the panel talking, and I hope the audience virtually wherever you are will join me in thanking them. Alex, Ashley, and Jen, thank you very much.
Thanks.
And good evening.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Want access to more CogX videos? Subscribe now for free at cogx.co.